Hello everybody. Today is 24th of July 2023 and here is the second video on the publication The Psychology of Climate Change, which as promised is here's the second part. In the first part I talked to you about how the anthropogenic global warming scenario is in fact a catastrophic scenario, and people are readily believing in such scenarios because this is how people like to basically how to think. And then I explained to you also the reasons how the biases people have. A bias is distortion of the probabilities in what future events. So some biases that people have, and I will again mention some of them, but for the summary please also watch the first video. And I talked to you about why people can have in general can have beliefs in certain scenarios. I'm not going to repeat them here. Here we're going to see how we think that this global warming, people believe in it because in what is called Pascal's wager. Now, the links to this paper can be found in Stallinga.org. It is in the European Scientific Journal from 2016. You can also find it here on this Department of Information number, and I will put links below here like always, and also a link to the first part of the video. This video you can see independently if you don't want to know alternative reasons why people believe and what all the biases of people are. They are a little bit relevant, but you can also see this video independently. So now I'm going to talk to you about specifically about one reason why people believe in this global warming scenario, and that is because what is called Pascal's wager. And Blaise Pascal, now I have to go to page 9 here of this publication. It is Pascal's wager, or he put a bet on his, let's say, with his soul, so to say. And Blaise Pascal said it himself: I do not know whether God exists, but I know that I have nothing to gain from being an atheist if he does not exist, whereas I have plenty to lose if he does. Hence, this justifies my belief in God. So I have nothing to gain and to lose. It means that there is something at stake here. There's a bet, and this what is at stake? We put it here as we call it moral coins, because it can be something in this life or afterlife or whatever. And then I will put this in so-called decision tables from game theory, which is basically these kind of things. You can have here believe in A or in not A, and the thing that believed in can be true or can be not true. And in this I put then the reward for this combination. So to put this in game theory, Pascal's wager about global warming, it is that global warming can be correct or it can be false. And a person can believe in it or can not believe in it, or believe in that it's not true. So there are 4 possibilities. So this table is a 2x2 table. These calculations are taken in the head of the people. The calculation is done in moral coins, not in real currency, and they also involve probabilities, as we see, and they have a final reward. And this reward can be occurring during one's life, but as in Pascal's wager, it can also be after life, and it can also be a negative reward. Let's say that the going to hell or something like this, that would be a negative reward. Or it can be 0. For instance, Pascal, if God does not exist, then of course the reward will be 0, because there is no heaven and hell or anything like that. So then the reward would be 0. We can actually summarize the entire Pascal's wager, or the entire belief in global warming that people have, by a single phrase, that is to say, better to be safe than sorry. That is Pascal's wager. But let's put it a little bit more formal, and we will see that we can get some very nice conclusions about people's behavior. So let's get started. I put here such a table. As you can see, it has 2 columns and 2 columns and 2 rows. In this column there is people, this column represents people believing in it, and this column represents people not believing it. And then the global warming is true or global warming is false. Now, if a person believes in it and it is true, then it is like, oh, a good person. I get my moral reward. So I put here just 10 moral coins like this. And on the other side, if a person doesn't believe in it and it turns out to be false, then it gets the same reward. It's actually probably not the case, but I take this to make it be on the safe side, that people are not going to complain. But probably it is nothing, it is zero, because nobody ever gets rewarded for adhering to non-belief. It's basically it would be zero effect. Now the reward, if you believe in it and it turns out to be false, I give it -1 a punishment, a small punishment, because you have actually believed in something that's nonsense, which is let's say immoral. On the other hand, as we have seen already in the previous video, that might not be really the case, because people, they will, with the cognitive dissonance and the backfire effect, they will say like, yes, -1, well, anyway, we have turned society more sustainable and actually polluting less. So anyway, believing in it, even if it is false, it is still correct. And politicians are also saying like, oh, but we created a lot of jobs. So therefore, even if it is wrong, we're getting a positive reward. But for the moment, let's just give a punishment of -1, because it's not nice to believe, it's immoral to believe in things that are nonsense. What the thing is, that there's a huge asymmetry between the punishment of being wrong on the believing side and the punishment of being wrong on the non-believing side. Because the worst that can happen is that a person didn't believe it and it turns out to be true. That is basically going to hell. You have wasted entire humanity, doomed it for eternal hot climate because of you, because you didn't believe it. So I gave it here -1000. Basically, may you rot in hell or something like this. This is, if you don't believe in this belief system, then you are being threatened by eternal hell. Well, as you can see then we can do a calculation how these people will do these mental calculations in their head, even if they don't know. So let's take here a person, we call it the prototype is the ignoramus, that doesn't know anything about the climate, never studied it, doesn't even have a PhD in physics, chemistry or anything related, but actually has a very strong conviction that it's true, as we will see. Because such an ignoramus is doing a calculation with 50-50 because he doesn't know anything. But look what is happening. If the probabilities are 50%, 50% the global warming being true and 50% of it being false, so you get 50% this reward and 50% this reward. So a believer will get 50% expectation value of +10 and 50% expectation value of -1. So the total expectation value of this person that is believing would be +4.5, while the expectation value of a non-believer would be 50% times -1000 plus 50% times +10. That is a punishment of -450 punishment, 450 punishment for non-believing. The ignoramus will of course readily accept and believe the thing. An ignoramus, for not knowing anything of the subject, will assume a 50-50% probability between the two scenarios. As can be seen, the high asymmetry between the expected punishments for people that erred will then shift the balance towards believing. That's as obvious as that. So now we can understand why in a survey, April 2000, 63% said they believe, note, it's not that they know, they believe global warming is happening. That makes sense. An ignoramus will stake all his effort on believing. Now, that would be the ignoramus, but we can also, the ignoramus can also become active. But before that, they will want to join a group, which I call fascism. People want to join a group because then they can actually steal the wealth of others. And it doesn't matter, they will be nice, comfortable, they don't have to think at all. They just join a group of people and then steal the wealth of people that don't believe the same things. And to note, therefore, there are no anti-global warming prophets nor profits. There are no institutes. You cannot make a career on an anti-global warming doctrine. That is not something that you can join with. There is no such thing. While the people that believe they can join and attack you, you as a non-believer cannot join and attack them. So this is also once more, but that is more in a social aspect. What I'm doing here is the individual aspect, the social aspect, which I'm going to publish in hopefully in maybe some months. That is called, I call this fascism, is the joining to steal the wealth of others. Now, the person can also actually be a believer or non-believer and be active about this, meaning trying to convince other people of their beliefs. And this actually gives a multiplication of the rewards. And I put it here tenfold, but it can be any other number. It is that it is bigger, the reward is bigger, multiplied by a number greater than 1, multiplied by a certain number, and that then increases the stakes. And so this is what I did here. We now have 4 columns. We have people can be believing in active, trying to convince others, believing in passive, basically shutting up and believing just individually, believing and non-believing and be passive, not believing and be active, trying to convince the others. Well, as you can see from this video, you could at this moment you would probably imagine me here, yours truly, because I am sort of like actively trying to convince you that it's all nonsense, also in the other videos. And we can see here then what will be the effect. At the end of this video I will show that I'm actually not in this column and in a completely different table, but this game theory decision table now is a 4x2. Because there's 4 types of people, and their global warming can be true, it can be false. Let's again take the ignoramus, but they can be passive or active, and the ignoramus will think it's 50%, 50%. And as you can see, the best reward, the best yield is actually now believing and active. So trying to convince other people that they're right. That is funny. People that don't know anything about the subject, it's really, for them it's 50-50. They will actively try to convince you that what they believe is correct, although they have no knowledge about the subject. And as you can see, the worst is, people like me would then be, is if I'm trying to convince people to believe in something that is nonsense, that is the most devilish thing that somebody could do, I would be Satan incarnated. So the punishment for a person then like that would be 10,000 moral coins, not only rotting in hell, but being tortured in hell all day long. Now, a wise person could actually try to determine that is what are the real probabilities. Is it true or not? But the problem is then, imagine that you want to do is, who will pay for you to study that? Because in the meantime you have to be fed and you have to get a salary, you have to get the clothes, you have to get a house, heating and so on, and somebody has to pay for it while you're studying this. And nobody will actually pay for that because people are believing and active. They will never pay for something that undermines their belief system, as we've seen in the previous video, that they would rather have the cognitive dissonance and denying it than paying you something to show them that they're wrong. Nobody will ever do this. Therefore, a good ignoramus citizen will not easily part with money to be used against his own belief. Therefore, it is in our society very difficult to study the subject through objectively. So most people, they will actually not be managing to study this at all. The best thing that they will say is if at the end the people that were believing in this and is debunked, then at the end but it's nonsense anyway, then at the end they will say, but we learned a lot, and anyway society is much cleaner and safer and friendlier and less polluting now. And that is actually, when we look around, this is the psychological approach of nearly all of our colleagues at the university. It's an opportunistic stance, because you cannot make a career, so they will make a career. I will show this actually into more detail, but let me first show you that actually science, the scientists, actually they know more or less that it's that the global warming is not correct. I will mention you here two initiatives. The first is the Oregon petition. It's a petition toward politicians to abandon disastrous climate policies, and it has and the other one is the Manhattan Declaration on Climate Change. These are two movements of real scientists with PhDs and all in relative subjects that are actually saying that, well, stop this because it's not correct. Global warming is not correct. So let's put this kind of persons, which we call here academics, the people in the Oregon petition and the Manhattan Declaration, or generally a scientist, a researcher, I should say, a scientist I will say in a moment. These researchers, they have a different probability. We're not talking about a general, which is called an academic, can be passive or active. They have a different probabilities about global warming being true or false. And as you can see, I put here, for instance, 95% global warming is false and 5% it is correct. So let's do again then the calculation of the reward. And you can see we still have believing where you get these rewards. You get the same rewards actually. The only thing that changed here is the probabilities. And you still have the active and passive. The active that is trying to convince others has a multiplication of a factor 10, and the passive doesn't get this multiplication. So now let's take a look. What is the optimum stance of what person would be winning? And you can see that actually all rewards are negative. Everybody will be punished for their sins. It's inescapable that we will be punished. But note now something very strange. Although global warming is false, 95% certain, an academic would know this, is actually still believing in it. Passively believing it, is no longer active, no longer shouting that others should be also convinced of this scenario, but believing passively because it has the least punishment. That is interesting. So an ignoramus that knows nothing about the subject is trying to convince you every day about how bad global warming it is. And these are all these experts and all these people on TV, that all the media, all the politicians, they're constantly trying to convince you that it's global warming is true, because they don't know anything about the subject. While academics, instead of becoming non-believers, and even better, active non-believers, they should speak out, because as Nassim Taleb said, if you see fraud and don't shout fraud, you are fraud. So people should be active non-believers, because they know it's not correct, but they are passive believers. Very interesting that even in the academic world, even the people basically know it is, from their own research, they know it is false, they believe in it. However, these percentages, of course, when the data is coming in, it's getting more and more convincing that the entire idea is wrong. The more and more this comes in, we can actually expect that these numbers here at the bottom, the expectation values of the reward, it will shift, and there will come a point that not believing will become advantageous. So we can expect a change of mentality in society when the proof against the global warming becomes so overwhelming that no longer a global warming belief is the optimal choice. So let's put this in a plot. It's a little bit phenomenological, but we get an idea. So I put this here in a plot. Here is the person's probability estimation of global warming to be true. 50% was the complete ignoramus. 0% is the all-wise academic. When we extrapolated this, as we've shown in the end of the previous video, the all-wise person actually knows that it is not correct if we extrapolate. So if it is 0% true, and then we can see on this changing this probability function, we can then actually calculate what is the expectation value and what would be the most advantageous stance of a person. So at 50%, the ignoramus, as you can see in this plot, it is this type. It is an active believer, as we've seen. An active believer is this line. So if the person gets more and more informed, you can see that the active believing gets less and less reward. And there comes a point that passive believing is like our scientist, which we had here at 5%. This was our academic, I should not say scientist, because they're behaving unscientific. these researchers that are actually already know that it's probably not correct, they still passively believe in it. And then suddenly there's a very small range here. Immediately they don't go to passive non-believing, but they go very rapidly then suddenly to active non-believing. So when we get more and more and more information, people go from active believers to passive believers to basically active non-believers. So suddenly all the scientists will speak out. It's like we will get a dialectical phase shift in society where suddenly all scientists will speak out. And suddenly everybody said, I always knew this. I always told you. Of course, they all will be again opportunists, but anyway, they will say that it's like this. Now, a skeptic, that is something else. The effects of measures combating climate change are actually the rewards here. They're actually not estimated well because the measures combating climate change, they actually cost a lot to society. So this reward is not like this. In effect, that the punishment to adhering to false global warming belief is severe, much more severe than that for erroneously not believing it, because the damage of climate change is not so bad as the damage done by the economic implementation of all these measures. So this one, actually, we could say that the skeptic has analyzed this and found out that believing actually is then would have this table, still 95% true, 5% true. The probabilities didn't change, but now the reward table has changed, and there's a strong punishment for believing in global warming while it was false. And now let's take a look at the return, at the decision table, and you can see that not believing, actively not believing, is the winning strategy. So you could probably already count me on here with many of my colleagues that I know that we are called the skeptics. Against them, they're the alarmists, the skeptics. We are the ones that are actively saying that we should not continue with these strategies, with all these measures. We are called the skeptics because we have simply an expectation reward that's best, while the alarmists are here in the ignoramus. They don't know anything about the climate, but they go for actively believing because that is what gives them the biggest reward. And for us skeptics, when we know that the probability that global warming is false is 95%, and actually the cost of climate change, combating climate change, is higher than just fighting the symptoms. Therefore, we see that for us, the skeptics, that the winning strategy is not believing and actually recording videos like this. Now, to sum it up, a real scientist, of course, where I should probably belong, has nothing to do with these belief tables and probabilities, because a scientist doesn't care about believing anything. So this is, let's say, a funny end of this video. It doesn't matter at all. Probability, it doesn't matter. Actually, what is the probability of being right or wrong? If you believe in something, you always get punished. If it's true or not, it doesn't matter, because you believed in it. As a scientist, you get punished. So believing something will give you a punishment as 1,000, and not believing in anything, well, because you do a good work as a scientist, you get a reward of 10, just that it would be your normal payment for a scientist. So the scientist game theory decision table is actually, as you can see yourself, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. You should simply not believe things, because belief goes against science. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I must say that this paper was written in 2016, and I expected that the climate change, that the data coming in would actually be already enough for people to become active non-believers. This is the prediction I made. We predict the flow of anti-global warming news items in the near future, and it didn't happen. So why didn't happen? Well, the climate is still warming up, as predicted by the people like Svensmark and so on. There is an alternative explanation for it. For instance, at the moment we have a quite warm year because we have high solar activity, and on top of that an El Nino, and it doesn't have anything to do with carbon dioxide. But still it's warm, relatively warm, and people then will use that to have the confirmation affirming the consequent, as they said in that watch the video about scientific method. They're using affirming the consequent and see that because the model of global warming predicts warming, we see warming, therefore the global warming model is correct, which of course is not how science works. And on top of that, we have very much in the last years, especially during the COVID pandemic, we have centralized government. We have given them much more power, and they are suffering from escalation of commitment. They cannot see what's going on in the world. They must invest every time more, double down on their investments in the measures. So they have a centralized government which has a runaway escalation of commitment. And we have some kind of, still we have positive feedback where people that are deniers, they are being eliminated. We're suffering from cancel culture. Videos, maybe this video will also be blocked and I have to put it on Rumble because this is from deniers and it's getting ever more censored. We're every time more living in a centralized government, be it Soviet communism or Nazi Germany or something like this. We are suffering from a centralized government where science is being cancelled and where speaking your opinion is being cancelled. So I hope that this video still reaches you because it's probably still getting worse. On the other hand, think optimistic because my prediction of this also failed. So maybe we are actually going in the right direction. Well, this is it about the psychology of global warming. I hope you enjoyed the video and see you in the next video one day.